Hi, how are you guys? Hi. Have you guys been here before? Okay. Well, today we have a guest artist, John Torreano, this man here. He's a sculptor and a painter, but he's not a glass maker. So he's working with our resident team of glass blowers, and so everything we're making is his design, but the actual glass objects are being made by our resident team of glass blowers. So sometimes we have guest artists who are glass makers themselves, and they'll make the actual objects. Sometimes we have other kinds of artists, and when they come up with designs, and our team of glass blowers makes the designs. So just a very brief introduction to how glass blowing works. Everything that we do starts out in our glass furnaces. The furnaces are the ones where you see the square hole in the steel wall and the doors closed. If you look up on the big screen, you'll see a diagram. That's what it looks like behind those doors. So each one of the furnaces has a big ceramic tank. In that ceramic tank is 1,000 pounds of molten glass. We keep the molten glass at 2,100 degrees, and at that temperature, the glass has the consistency of honey. So it's like a big giant crock pot full of honey. We want to get it out to make stuff. We take one of those steel pipes, those are called blow pipes, and we dip them into the molten glass like you dip one of these into a jar of honey. We dip it in, twirl it around, a little bit of the molten glass sticks to the end of the pipe. Pipe is hollow, so when you blow, ball of glass blows up like a little balloon. If you want to make something larger, you dip it in, blow a little bubble, let it harden. Then you dip it in a second time, or a third time, or a fourth time, until you got all enough glass to make whatever you're making. All the glass that's in those furnaces is clear, it has no color. We buy colored glass in various forms, and then we melt colored glass onto our clear glass. So we buy these like an artist buys paint, red, yellow, pink, blue, and then we melt a layer of the colored glass over the clear glass. We can buy it in the bars. We can also buy it in little chips of colored glass. You can see little chips here, little chips on that table. These are called frit. And when we melt those onto our glass, they become little dots of color, like you see here. So they're starting the bubble for one of Mr. Torreano's sculptures. That's Sarah in the dark blue shirt. And she just coated her bubble with a layer of colored glass. She'll get that all shaped up. She'll let that cool a little bit, and then we're going to coat that a bunch of times with more clear glass. We put up some of Mr. Torreano's work up on the big screen. So, like I said, he's a painter and a sculptor, and he's made glass sculptures before, but his main work is painting and sculpture. He's often made things with these kind of gem shapes and lots of little dots. These paintings are inspired by astronomical images, like things you might see from the Hubble telescope. So all these little dots of colors are, related to stars in the heavens. And these particular shapes, which we're making for him today, he calls columns. So we'll be blowing things very similar to the ones you see on the table. Columns, like in a Greek temple. You guys have any questions? So now Sarah's going to coat her bubble with another layer of clear molten glass. The glass in the furnace is clear, but when it comes out, it's very hot, and that yellow-orange color that you see is the glow from the heat. So Sarah just picked up some little pieces of glass from that hot plate. We're going to melt those in, and those will become the various dots of color on the design. So in the center, Gabe in the black hat is preparing what's called the punty. We're going to use that later on in the process as a handle to hold the sculpture from the bottom while we shape the top. So he's just doing some of the initial preparation now. We'll keep it warm, and then we'll use it a little later on in the process. So over on the far left, Sarah in the dark blue shirt is just rounding out our little bubble. We've melted the decoration into the surface. We're going to round it out, make it smooth and even, and then I think we're going to coat it with some more glass. Do you guys have any questions? We have a guest artist today, this guy from Torreano. He's a sculptor and painter from New York. He's not a glassmaker by trade, so we often invite artists from other disciplines to come and work in our studio. We have a track team of glass blowers that work for the museum. So the guest artist will help with design and organizing the production process. So that's what's going on today. Blowing in forms like these you see here on the table. It's called a column. About 15 centimeters in diameter. We start over on that edge, and most of the finishing, most of the actual production is done over here. You guys have any questions? So right now, Sarah's letting her glass cool off and stiffen, and we're going to dip it back into our big tank of molten glass and coat it with another layer of clear glass. The tool in Sarah's hand that she's shaping the glass with is called the block, B-L-O-C-K. It's made out of wood. It's stored in a bucket of water. As long as the wood itself is wet, the tool doesn't burn, nor does it leave any marks as she shapes the glass. So now we're going to coat the glass with another layer of clear molten glass. Sarah's dipping into our glass furnace. Behind that door is a big ceramic tank with 1,000 pounds of molten glass in it. She'll drip a little bit of the excess glass into that steel can. We'll save that excess glass, and eventually that'll go back in the furnace. Real danger in this shop. So far out. So basically, we're going to be starting the sculptures on that far bench over there. And most of the action will be on this center bench right here. So we're in a good spot? Yeah. No, no. That's we blow very thin bubbles of glass and we bust them up. And then we melt them onto the glass and they make little patches of color. Those are little different. They're also for making colored patches, but little chips of colored glass called frit. it looks like Sarah's going to take another gather. Each time we dip it into the big tank of molten glass, it's called taking a gather. So Sarah's going to drip off some of that excess glass into the steel can. Every once in a while, the steel pipes get hot. When they do, we take them over to that trough. That's called the pipe cooler. We've got another one right here. We just lay the metal pipe in the trough and spray water on it to cool it down. So Sarah's going to add some more dots to the surface. Those are little chips of colored glass called frit, F-R-I-T. So each one of those little chips will become a dot of color on the surface. So from this point on, we'll be working at the center workbench. So now we have all the glass we need. We have all the colors melted in. Now it's time to blow it up to its full size and shape. So the man in the center leading the team is Ben Cobb. He's the head of our glass shop in a light blue shirt. He's just rounding that big bubble out. One of the glass blowers is crouched down to the left of the workbench. He's the guy that's blowing. So he's blowing through the steel tube, the blowpipe, and inflating it little by little as Ben shapes it. So you can see Gabe in the black hat is blowing. Ben is shaping the glass. Sarah in dark blue shirt. He's heating the glass up, making it soft. She brings it to Ben. And now he's making a sharp crease in it. The tool in his hand is called the jacks. And he squeezes the glass and makes a crease. And that's called jacking it down. That crease is going to be the place where we can break the glass away from the metal pipe once we're done shaping it. He embedded little glass jewels into his paintings. And so from that, he decided to make bigger glass jewels, and he became involved with the Pilchuck School. And he went up there as a guest artist. They made glass things for him, glass sculptures. And there he is right there. Yes, John Torreano. Can we put up some of John's work up on the big screen? So he's worked with these diamond shapes in other materials, but also in glass. A lot of his paintings are inspired by astronomical images, kinds of things you might see from the Hubble telescope, galaxies and nebulas and star fields. So this elongated pill shape is what he calls a column. And you can see we've made some of them here on the table. And we're making the same thing out of that bubble right there with all different designs. When they hold the glass down at an angle like that, the glass is soft and is actually stretching under its own weight. So we're trying to straighten out the sides of this column shape. We're rolling it on what we call the newspaper marver. It's just a plywood sheet covered with several sheets of wet newspaper. It allows us to straighten the sides without leaving any marks. So the man crouched down to the left, he's going to be blowing. He's just inflating it very slightly as Ben, sitting at the bench in the bright blue shirt, shapes. You guys have any questions? We want the sides of the shape to be straight. So he rolls it against that newspaper and wood, just straightens out the side. Fold the paper to go to the wall. So as Ben shapes it on the newspaper, his assistant holds her hand over the end of the pipe, keep it closed, and that kind of keeps the air in there and provides a little back pressure so the shape doesn't flatten. Can we put up the furnace diagram? So if you look, that's what it looks like behind that door. So it's a big ceramic tank with 1,000 pounds of molten glass. Thanks. We shut them up, and keep this out for a long time. We have propane burners that we can stick in there. Yes. Well, there's two kinds of furnaces. There's the glass furnaces that hold the molten glass, and then there's the round guys that they're in and out of as they're working. The glass furnaces can stay on 24/7. The round guys, the glory holes, those are only on during the workday. No, the glass furnaces are shut off using our safety system, so like The next thing we're going to do is drill a small hole in the base of the sculpture. We're going to transfer this glass from the rod it was originally blown on to a second steel rod called the punty. The second steel rod will be hollow, so we can stick our punty over the hole we're drilling, and then we can blow into the form and keep it inflated while we shape the other side. So that drill is just an ordinary electric drill. The bit is a sharpened rod of tungsten. We heat up the tungsten rod till it's glowing hot, and then we can drill right into the hot glass. Over on the far left, Gabe, man in the black hat, is preparing the punty. This is the second steel rod. This is the one that's going to hold it while we shape the opposite end. So Gabe, over on the left, has the punty, the second steel rod. He's going to bring it over, and we're going to stick it on the base of the sculpture. This is just going to act as a temporary handle to hold the sculpture from the bottom while we shape the top. When we're ready to remove the glass from the original rod, we'll take a pair of tweezers, dip them in water, drip a little water where we want the glass to break, and then a sharp tap on the metal rod will release it. So here he goes. Ben in the bright blue shirt, is dripping water. We want to break it. A little tap, and off it comes. So now it's held from the bottom. The top is exposed. The top can now be heated and shaped. We want both ends to be round and smooth. Does anybody have any questions? So we're heating up the top in the glory hole. The glory holes are those round ovens. They're powered by natural gas and forced air, and we keep them at approximately 2,300 degrees. So Gabe is mostly sticking the front end in there. So we're getting the front end extra hot and soft so we can shape that without disturbing the rest of the object. You'll see when he comes out of the glory hole, just the tip of the sculpture will be glowing. That'll be the part that's extra hot and soft. So we're going to stretch out the glass at the top a little bit. We're grabbing it with a tweezer, stretching it out, and then we're going to trim some of that off. So Ben is stretching the glass, Ben in the bright blue shirt. And he's going to squeeze it. And we'll break off that stretch part. Take a pair of shears. So the forms that we're looking for are closed and round at both ends. So Sarah, crouched down to the left of the workbench. She's the person that's blowing. She's blowing through the steel tube, the blowpipe, and inflating it just a little bit as Ben shapes it. If you were here earlier, we drilled a small hole in the bottom of the sculpture, stuck another pipe over that so we can still blow into the form and keep it inflated as we shape it. Gray pad in Ben's hand. Ben is the guy in the bright blue shirt. It's just folded up newspaper soaked in water, ordinary newspaper. So we're pretty much done with this one. Anything we make like this has to be cooled off slowly. If we just made it, put it on the table, walked away, it would cool too quickly and unevenly and it would shatter. So we're going to take it off the metal rod and place it in our annealing oven. Each day we heat up the annealing oven to 920 degrees. We place all the objects we make during the day in there, and then at night we cool everything down all at once. So if you look to the far right, you'll see one of our glass blowers putting on some protective clothing. She's going to carry the finished sculpture to our annealing oven. Those big yellow gloves are made out of Kevlar. Kevlar is a heat-resistant insulating material. When she grabs that sculpture, it'll be about 1,000 degrees. The glass will be hard. We're going to drip a few drops of water on the joint to crack it. A little tap, off it comes, and into our annealing oven to cool slowly overnight. To the right is center, you'll see Gabe doing what's called charging the furnace. We get our glass in little chunks called cullet. We shovel them into the furnace, cook them overnight. In the morning, we'll have a tank of clear molten glass. So we have two furnaces. In one, we're cooking the glass. The other one, the glass is all cooked up and ready to use. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah, I mean, this is not a factory. This is a museum. And the purpose of this studio is so you can see how things are made. See people have different approaches to using glass. So it's educational, really. It's not a business. If you think of it as a business, you get the totally wrong model. It will be a terrible business.
Yeah, we're staying at the hotel Torreano.
Hmm.
That's an awesome hotel. Like every store has a specific store that does that
Yeah,
kind of
they
glass.
have all sorts of glass on display.
Are those the same artists featured here in Spain also, or just
Uh, some of them.
some of them?
Yeah, we have about 30 different guest artists come over a period of a year. They come from all over the world: Italy, Japan, France, Sweden.
So who's the artist in Spain?
This guy right here, John Torreano.
So he's from
He's from New York.
New York. Okay. And his work is in the museum.
Nope.
Okay. And he's famous for
He's
glass.
famous. No, he's famous for painting and sculpture.
Okay.
We often invite artists who are not glassmakers at all to come, and they come up with designs, and our guys make them.
Ah, got it. And how long has he been here? Is it like related or?
Since Wednesday. Since Wednesday.
Okay. And then the type of art that he's coming up with are these right here.
Yes.
Okay. And nobody has done something similar to that, or?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe.
So what do you call
He
that?
calls them columns.
Okay. Cool.
He does painting sort of inspired by astronomical images. So the dots sort of represent stars.
What was the largest? Is that yellow one? The glass also?
Yes.
So it looks like that's one of the largest stone pieces you guys have made so far with him.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I haven't been here all week, so. Oh, and that
Is he
was.
selling?
Well, he sells them in art galleries in New York. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He's putting out little chips of colored glass that are going to melt on and form the dots. We're going to roll our little glass in those little chips. Each chip will stick to the glass, and when it melts, it'll form a little dot of color. So he's laying out the pattern. So over on the far left, Sarah's starting the next piece. She's blown a little bubble of glass, coated it with a little bit of colored glass. You can see she's added a little stripe if you look up on the big screen. Can we play the replay, the shortened replay of the process? So if you look up on the big screen, we have a little shortened replay. Show you how this process goes. So Sarah starts out by blowing a bubble of clear glass. We melt on colored glass. We'll push that colored glass back until it entirely coats the original bubble. We'll then coat it with several more layers of clear glass. We'll melt on little chips of colored glass to make dots. We'll melt those in. Then we'll start to blow it up to its full size and shape. Drill a small hole in the base and put a second steel pipe over that hole. The second steel pipe will act as a handle. It will also allow us to blow into the shape as we shape the other end. And when we're done, we'll take it off the steel pipe and place it in our annealing oven to cool slowly overnight. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. Okay. It's a wonderful story, but it's not true. Glass doesn't flow at room temperature even over millions of years. Yes, I do. People see old windows, and the windows appear to be thicker at the bottom and thinner at the top. So people assume that the glass flowed and sagged down, and that's why they're thicker. But the truth is, when glass was handmade, it wasn't completely uniform. It was thicker in some areas and thinner in others. And when the people cut out the window panes, common sense said, if you have a thick part on one side and a thin part on the other, you put the thick side down, you don't rest it on the thin part. So those windows were like that when they were brand new. Laying out our pattern of chipped and colored glass, and then we're going to roll a bubble over it, and each of those chips will melt in and become a dot. So for those of you who just came in, our guest artist is John Torreano. He's a painter and a sculptor. He's from New York. Can we put up some of John's work up on the big screen? So he started out as a painter. He still paints and sculpts. Very often we invite artists from other disciplines to come to our studio and work with our team of glass blowers. So everything we're making today is Mr. Torreano's design, but the actual glass objects are being made by our resident team of glass blowers. So there's some of his paintings. Some of his paintings are inspired by astronomical images, the kind of images you would see from, say, the Hubble telescope. So stars and galaxies, nebulas, that kind of thing. So the kind of galaxy of dots and little bits of color are the same things that are inspiring him for these glass column sculptures. So Gabe is pulled out. Gabe is the man in the black hat. He stretched out a little rod of white glass. We call it a stringer. We're going to use that to melt on individual dots later on in the process. So over here on our hot plate, we've laid out a design of chips of colored glass. We're going to melt them into that bubble that they're making over there. Does anybody have any questions? Questions are free. Yes, sir. Glass. Yeah, we're melting colored glass into colored glass. So all the decoration is glass. So over on the far left, Sarah in the dark blue shirt is made the bubble to start the next sculpture. She's coated that a bubble of clear glass with some colored glass, melted on some dots. We'll round that thing out, let it cool a bit and stiffen, and then we'll coat it with several layers of clear molten glass. We play Charging the Furnace.
Charging the furnace is what we call filling the furnace up with glass. Glass cullet is washed clean and loaded into tubes for filling. Here at the museum, we don't use recycled bottles. Instead, we melt cullet that has been specifically designed to make blown glass art. The primary ingredient in glass is silica sand, or silicon dioxide. The other two main ingredients are soda, or sodium oxide, which lowers the melting temperature, and lime, or calcium oxide, the stabilizer. Once the cullet is loaded into the 2300 degree furnace, a rake is used to level the glass for even melting. The furnaces at the Museum of Glass hold approximately 1,000 pounds of clear molten glass and run continuously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
So Over here on the left, Sarah's just rounding out our bubble, making it nice and even. We're going to coat that several more times with more layers of clear molten glass. And we're going to melt some more decoration into it. The gray pad in Sarah's hand is just folded up newspaper soaked in water. As long as the newspaper is wet, the paper doesn't burn too much, and it doesn't leave any marks as she shapes the glass. Yes, sir. Yes, the furnaces are where we keep the big tanks of molten glass. The glory holes are just a hot chamber for heating and softening the glass while we work it. There's no glass in the glory holes. So Sarah's dipping into the furnace. Each time we dip it in and coat it with more glass, it's called taking a gather, G-A-T-H-E-R. She'll drip a little excess off into that steel can, and we'll save that, and that can go back in the furnace later on. We're going to melt on some chips of colored glass. Hot glass sticks to hot glass, so we've heated up the little chips, and they stick to the surface of Sarah's bubble. Each one will get melted on, and then they'll become little dots of color on the finished piece. Every once in a while, steel pipes get hot. When they do, we take them over there. We spray water on the metal pipe. The little gadget is called the pipe cooler. And just cools the steel pipe down a little bit, makes it easier to hold. Blow it up like a balloon. We can make it bigger. We have metal tools we can squeeze it with. We can cut it with scissors. Just put it in the fire and press it off. And then we can squeeze it, stretch it, poke it, blow it up like a balloon. It's got to be hot. So Sarah's heating up her bubble in the glory hole. That makes it soft. The glory holes have no glass in them. They're just a hot chamber. We run them at about 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. And they're powered by natural gas. So Sarah is going to round out that bubble. The tool in her hand is called the block. It's made out of wood. It's stored in a bucket of water as long as the wood itself is wet. We can shape the glass without leaving any marks. The tool looks like a scoop, but we don't scoop up any water in it. We use it empty. We just want the wood itself to be wet. There's two ways in which we heat up the glass. Sometimes we heat it up with a big round oven, the glory hole. Sometimes we heat it up with a torch. When we heat it up with a torch like Sarah's doing now, it allows her to focus the heat in a specific place. So, Kristen, our cold worker, the woman who does the grinding and cutting and polishing. She's just finished some of the sculptures that Mr. Torreano made earlier in the week. She's ground the bottom so they could stand up and be displayed standing up. So the ones we're making today are going to end up in the same format that you see here, but they'll have different colors and different designs. All the colors that you see are distorted by the heat. Everything looks sort of orangey. That orange color that you're seeing is the glow from the heat. So there's going to be yellows and whites and all sorts of different colors. But while it's hot, it's going to glow orange. Every once in a while, pipes get hot. When they do, we take them over there to the right. It's called the pipe cooler. We just spray water on the metal pipe. That cools it down, makes it easier to hold. So right now, Sarah is letting her bubble cool down and stiffen a bit before we coat it with another layer of clear molten glass. She's going to dip it into our glass furnace, twirl it around a little bit till the entire thing is coated. She's going to drip some of the excess into that steel can. You can see as it drips off how fluid the molten glass really is. It really is just like honey. You guys have any questions? What? Okay, well, you don't have to. Okay. It's going to be a sculpture, an abstract sculpture. Nope. Just look at it and enjoy it. We're making sheet glass the old-fashioned way. Blow a cylinder, slice it down the side. We're putting that up until it's soft, and we're going to unroll it. Make custom sheets of glass, special designs of it. So these just going to be independent panels by themselves, not going to be part of stained glass window. So now we're blowing the glass up to its full size and shape. The man crouched down to the left in the black hat, Gabe, he's the guy that's blowing. He's blowing through the steel tube, the blowpipe, and inflating the glass while Ben in the bright blue shirt shapes it. For those of you who came in a little bit later, we're making sculptures similar to the ones that you see here on the pedestal. And the design is by our guest artist, John Torreano, who's preparing his talk for tomorrow, working on his computer. So tomorrow, Mr. Torreano is going to give a talk here at 2 o'clock tomorrow. But we will be streaming it to the internet, so you guys won't be here, but you can go to our website and watch it from home in your fuzzy slippers. Mr. Torreano is a sculptor and painter from New York. We often invite artists from outside of the glass world to come here and work with our resident team of glass blowers. Mr. Torreano, from time to time, has worked in glass, but most of his work is straightforward painting and sculpture. When we hold the glass down at an angle like that, the glass is hot and soft and actually stretching under its own weight. Yes, ma'am. I would say 8. It's 8 pounds. You guys have any questions? 2,300 degrees. Fairly warm. Six and a half times what it takes to cook a turkey. It depends what you're making. These things are running about an hour and a quarter. We always work in teams. So we're just letting it stretch out. We want these long cylinder. Oh, 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 oh. We have all different colors of glass, very soft and all different grades. So they don't, it's not too soft easily, it's not getting soft quicker. And if you carefully can control that, you got to wait for it to, so it's sort of folded and then two sides so they stuck to each other. But Mr. Torreano doesn't mind, so we don't mind. He's okay with it. Different colors, some are softer, some are stiffer. How do we make the horse? I have a little movie I can show you. You want to see it? Can we play the pony video? So look up there. It'll show you how we make our little glass horses. So the next thing we're going to do is drill a hole in the base of the sculpture. We're going to eventually we'll stick another pipe over that hole, and that'll allow us to blow air into the sculpture and keep it inflated while we shape the opposite end. So Ben in the bright blue shirt has a electric drill. Chucked up in that electric drill is a sharpened tungsten rod. We heat the tip of the tungsten rod till it's glowing, and we can drill right into the hot glass. So over on the far left, Gabe in the black hat is preparing the second pipe. He's coated the end with a little molten glass, but he's left the hole at the end of the pipe open. We're going to stick it over the hole we drilled, and then we can blow through there and keep the shape inflated. If we use a solid rod to hold the shape, it's called a punty. When we use a pipe that we blow through to hold the sculpture, it's called a blow punty, because we can blow through the hole and keep the shape inflated. As he picked it, well, just like any artist does. He looks at him and says, oh, I'd like some blue, I'd like some green. What? Not that I know of. He just seems to do it at random. Yep. So we stuck the punty onto the base of the sculpture. When they feel that bond is strong enough, we'll break the glass away from the original pipe. We'll take a pair of tweezers, dip them in water, drip a little water where we want it to break, and then a sharp tap on the metal pipe will release it. So now we're just making sure that the sculpture is centered on the punty. The punty, P-U-N-T-Y, that's what we call the second steel rod that's holding it at this moment. So now we're concentrating the heat on the very top of the sculpture. You'll see when it comes out, just the tip will be glowing. That means the part is extra hot and extra soft. We can shape the tip without affecting the rest of the shape. Original bubble was coated with transparent yellow and white, yellow, green, and white. So now we're going to close up the opposite end of the sculpture. Ben has a tool in his hand called the jacks. He's going to squeeze it as his assistant turns it. We'll close down that end of the sculpture, and then we'll cut off that little cup shape at the top. So tomorrow at 2 o'clock, our guest artist, John Torreano, is going to do a talk, tell you about his work. He's a very famous sculptor and painter in New York City. And if you're not here today, you can watch it on the internet. We'll be streaming it live from our site, museumofglass.org. And if you can't watch it tomorrow, it'll probably end up on our YouTube channel. So just go to Torreano Museum of Glass YouTube, and you can find it later on. Sometimes if we don't fill up the oven, we'll leave the thing hot and put more stuff in it. We're rolling the glass on what we call the newspaper marver. It's just a sheet of plywood covered with several sheets of wet newspaper. It allows us to straighten out the sides of the sculpture without leaving any marks on the glass. The colors in glass come from mostly from different metals dissolved in the glass when it's first cooked up. So cobalt makes it blue, chromium makes it green, a little bit of gold makes it pink. Gold makes it pink. What? Orange is usually cadmium and selenium. What? We don't really have a gold. We have, yellow glass. We don't really have a gold glass. We can melt gold leaf onto the glass to make it look gold. But that's real gold on there. You must have an electric personality. So we're almost done with Mr. Torreano's sculpture. Everything that we make here has to be cooled slowly. So we're going to take it off the metal rod and place it in an oven called the annealing oven, where it will be cooled slowly overnight. Each day we heat up the annealing oven to 920 degrees. We place all the objects that we make during the day in there, and then at night we cool it very, very slowly so it doesn't break. So Sayuri's taking the sculpture to our annealing oven, and we'll cool it overnight. Let's have a hand for John Torreano and the Museum of Glass Hot Shop team, Ben Cobb, Sarah Gilbert, and Gabe Feenan, and Sayuri Fukuda. So for those of you who came in a little bit later, our guest artist is John Torreano, New York City artist. And he's working with our resident team of glassblowers, making sculptures like the ones you see here. Mr. Torreano is not a glassmaker by trade, so when we have an artist who's not a glassmaker, they come up with designs, and our resident team of glassblowers make the actual objects. So Mr. Torreano is laying out a pattern of colored glass chips, which will melt into our big bubble. It will end up being the colored dots that you see on the surface. You guys have any questions? All the glass in our furnaces is clear. We buy our colored glass in the form of these bars. We buy it like an artist buys paint, red, yellow, pink, and blue. We blow a bubble of clear glass from our furnace. We heat up a chunk of colored glass, and then we melt a layer of colored glass over our clear glass. We then dip that in more clear glass. So what you end up with is something that looks colored, but if you cut through it, you see it's just that one skinny layer that we coated the initial bubble with. So it looks yellow, but really it's just coated. So that's what we're doing over there. Sarah's going to blow a bubble of clear glass. Sarah in the dark blue shirt and shorts. Sayuri, sitting on the bench in the far left, is heating up 2 chunks of colored glass, sort of similar colors to these. And we're going to coat the bubble with these 2 colors. Clear glass.
The yellow's on the inside, huh?
Well, it's on it's clear glass. It looks really close. Then yellow, and a lot more clear. Little chunks of glass. We fill up the big clay pot with chunks of glass. Pick it up, and they all melt together. Can we put up the glass furnace diagram? So inside the furnace, behind the closed door, is a big ceramic tank. In that ceramic tank is 1,000 pounds of molten glass. We keep the molten glass at 2,100 degrees. At that temperature, it's like honey. It's like a big pot of honey. So we take the steel pipes and we dip them into the molten glass like you dip one of those wooden honey dippers into a jar of honey. A little bit sticks to the end. We blow through the hollow pipe, and the ball of glass blows up like a balloon. So over on the left, we're getting ready to color our initial bubble. Sarah's blowing a bubble of clear glass. Sarah's the woman sitting down. Sayuri, the woman standing up, is heating up chunks of colored glass, and we're going to melt the colored glass over the clear glass. Oh, this time I guess we're just putting on a big dot. So Sarah's melting on big dots of color to coat the original bubble. Can we play the process recap? So we have a little video here where we've condensed the process. So we're melting some colors onto the original bubble of clear glass. Oh well, that didn't work. And we're going to lay on some colors to make the dots. Now in the corner. All right, hot work. Oh, later on. Later on. She's gonna melted some color on from the general background color. Then we're going to dip it in a bunch of clear glass. Then we melt on big chips, more clear glass, then little chips.
And then after all that is done, that's when you go to the
Well, we're going all the way along the way. It's hollow right now. I'll make tubular things like the ones on the pipe. Does anybody have any questions? What? Yes. have any questions? The furnaces run at 2100 degrees. The glory hole runs at 2300. Kind of volcano hot. Cool it down. Oh, it's coated more clear glass and stiff. Clear glass. It's not wobbling around and collapsing. No, it's got either or. That's just for dipping in. We have a little extra where we drip up extra into that can. Save that glass and that'll go back in. We recycle our clear waste. We don't recycle our colored waste. The clear waste, because the furnace, when it melts glass, is all clear. Typically, you'll see that as a waste. That would be So Sarah's blowing a little air on her bubble to cool it off and stiffen it a bit. And then we're going to coat it with more clear molten glass. So Sarah's going over to our glass furnace. Behind that door, there's a big ceramic tank. In that ceramic tank is 1,000 pounds of molten glass. We keep the molten glass at 2100 degrees. At that temperature, the glass is like honey. It's like dipping into a big jar of honey. She's dripping a little bit of the excess glass off into that steel canister. We'll save that excess glass, and eventually that'll go back in the furnace. The bubble in chips of colored glass, laid out by Mr. Torreano, our guest artist. So now Sarah's melting in the dots of color. We're just rounding that bubble out, make it nice and even. At this point, the bubble is hollow, and the walls are quite thick, and we've melted in the chips of colored glass. Does anybody have any questions? Well, it was blown up. It's hollow already. And dipped it in the molten glass and coated it with another layer of molten glass, which made it thicker. design it and make it. It's different with different artists. But if you go, I mean, think about Frank Lloyd Wright, famous architect. You say, oh, that's a beautiful Frank Lloyd Wright building. Frank wasn't in there hanging sheetrock. Overnight. We're doing these slowly, slowly, slowly turn it down. Yep. Wood craft. New York City. Every once in a while, these steel pipes get hot. When they do, we take them over to that trough. That's called the pipe cooler. Just spray water on the metal pipe. That cools it down, makes it easier to hold. Because then when they touch the hot glass, they can crack. So a little chip, roll right over. Sort of. See the shape and the pattern, that the colors, when we finish here, will still be supported by the heat. Well, we can blow it all along. It's hollow right now. So we're going to continue to blow till we finish this, probably another 20 minutes or so. But out in the lobby, there's going to be a performance by the Synergy Dance Company. So if you want to go see that, that'll be starting in about 8 minutes. And we're going to be blowing glass all day, making similar things. So you're not going to really miss anything if you go and watch the dancers and come back, and we'll be making more stuff. We'll be taking our lunch probably after we finish this piece. We'll be gone for an hour, then we'll come back and make more glass. Quickly and unevenly. Great. So we're rolling it on what we call the newspaper marver. It's just a sheet of plywood covered with several sheets of wet newspaper. And it allows us to straighten out the sides of the sculpture without leaving any marks. Next thing we're going to do is transfer the glass from the rod it's blown on here to a second steel rod called the punty. Gabe, in the black hat on the left, he's preparing the punty. Gabe's rod is going to act as a handle to hold the sculpture from the bottom while we shape the top. So here comes Gabe with the punty. We'll stick it on the bottom of the sculpture. We'll make a little notch in it so we have a place we can break it off. We're going to drip a little water where we want it to break. And then a sharp tap. And off it comes. So now the opposite end of the sculpture is exposed. That part can now be heated and shaped. You guys have any questions? Gabe is heating up the glass. He's concentrating the heat on the very far tip. So that part will be extra hot and soft. And we can shape that part without disturbing the rest of the sculpture. Concentrating the heat at the very tip. One of the glass blowers is crouched down to the left of the bench. She's blowing, just inflating glass very slightly as Ben shapes it with a wet newspaper. So everything we make has to be cooled off slowly. So we'll take it off the metal rod and we'll place it in a special oven called the annealing oven where it'll be cooled slowly overnight. When we remove it from the metal rod, it'll be about 1,000 degrees. At that temperature, the glass will be hard. We'll place it in the annealing oven and we'll cool it slowly overnight. If we just took it off that pipe and put it on the table, it would cool too quickly and unevenly and it would shatter. We're going to drip some water on the joint between the punty and the the sculpture. Little tap, off it comes, and into our annealing oven to cool slowly overnight. So let's have a hand for the Museum of Glass Hot Shop team and John Torreano, our guest artist. So that concludes our demonstrations for this morning. We're going to take an hour lunch. We'll be back in an hour. If anybody has any questions before I go to lunch, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, enjoy your lunch.